Hello and welcome to today's webinar, a national scan of bike share equity programs, best practices and lessons learned. My name is Brendan Williams. I am the Research Program Administrator at Portland State University's Transportation, Research and Education Center. TREC leads the National Institute for Transportation and Communities, one of 7 national university transportation centers, funded by the U.S. Department of Transportation. NITC's research priority is improving mobility of people and goods to build strong communities. NITC consortium members are the University of Utah, University of Oregon, University of Arizona, University of Texas at Arlington, and Oregon Institute of Technology. Our presenters today are Nathan McNeil, John MacArthur, and Adriel Thornton. Nathan is a research associate in the Center for Urban Studies at Portland State University. He conducts research around the impacts of new bicycle infrastructure and programs on travel behavior and attitudes towards cycling, shared use mobility programs, and the connection between land use and transportation. John MacArthur is the Sustainable Transportation Program Manager for TREC. He is active in research related to sustainable transportation, particularly new mobility, e-bikes, bike share, transit, and the relationship between transportation and public health. Adriel Thornton, is MoGo's Director of Marketing and Community Outreach. MoGo is a nonprofit bike share system in Detroit. Adriel is a native Detroiter. He's an expert in community relations. He maintains the social media channels and messaging and leads the branding, promotional, and public marketing for MoGo. We took a little break during the summer from our webinars, but we're back with monthly NITC webinars starting today. And then on October 6th, we'll have Jenny Liu from Portland State University presenting economic and business outcomes of bicycle and pedestrian improvements. Partners include People for Bikes and Bennett Midland. On Tuesday, November 10th at 10 a.m., Keith Bartholomew of the University of Utah will present bus stops, access, and equity. And on December 11th at 10 a.m., Li Meng Wang from Portland State University will present land use and transportation policies for a sustainable future. This presentation will be about 40 minutes long. Then we're going to have about 15 minutes to answer audience questions. During the presentation, please submit your questions via the GoToWebinar control panel. After the webinar, you will receive an email with a link to the video recording and presentation slides. If you are tracking professional development hours, this webinar is eligible for 1 hour of continuing education credit. Instructions on how to redeem the credit will be included in your post-webinar email. All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to our presenters. I'm going to give control over to Nathan.
All right, thank you, Brendan. Okay, looks like my screen is up there now. So yeah, first I want to say thank you to the Better Bike Share Partnership and TREC for funding our research here at Portland State around bike share and equity. And we're really excited to have Adriel Thornton joining us from MoGo today. So I'm really excited to hear what he has to share about what MoGo is doing. And with that, I'm going to jump into a quick webinar outline and just let you know what we're going to be covering. So I'm going to talk briefly about a little bit of background around bike share and equity and what some research that led into our project told us about it. Then talk a little bit about a prior Breaking Barriers to Bike Share research project that we did a couple of years ago, which set the scene for our more recent national scan of bike share equity programming. And I'll talk a little bit about that report, which came out last year. I'll hand it over to John, who will discuss bike share equity briefs, which were some recent reports that we put out, some short reports over the summer to try to make the national scan more approachable and accessible. And then over to Adriel for some lessons from MoGo Detroit. I'm not going to waste any time, so get right into it. So what do we know about bike share equity? First, a few things that we kind of learned from other projects and other studies going into our research. First, equity in bike share, there have been a number of studies that have shown that people who are lower income or non-white have less access to bike share in their neighborhood, so they just don't have, and this is more based around station-based bike share systems, but they didn't have a station within their neighborhood, or they were less likely to. Further studies of bike share users have shown that they're often disproportionately white, higher income, male, and younger. There is one thing I'll note, and I'll come back to this in a few slides, but there are some indications that there are some successes being had in overcoming that income gap in a few places. So yeah, as I said, we'll come back to that. And then a third challenge that we've seen is that even when bike share stations have been placed in low-income and minorities communities, a lot of systems have struggled to get people to use the systems. Those stations have seen lower use, and there are some challenges to get for dockless systems. Getting bikes to remain in those communities has been a challenge in terms of they often get ridden to other parts of the system. So with that in mind, we put together this research project from 2015 to 2017, where we received funding from Better Bike Share Partnership and TREC to examine barriers for minority and low-income communities using bike share. For that project, we looked at 3 cities that had placed bike share stations in underserved communities and were offering discounted memberships and engagement programming to try to overcome equity gaps. We surveyed residents in those neighborhoods. We surveyed bike share users and people who had, and tried to focus on people who had signed up for the system through discounts and equity programs to kind of understand the effectiveness of those programs. And we talked to operators of the systems. There are a few reports on this project on our project website, but I want to touch on a few of the key findings. And again, I'm going to do this pretty briefly. So one thing that we found is that there is potential in these neighborhoods. So a lot of the low-income and minority residents that we surveyed viewed bike share positively and told us they were interested in using it more. One of the things we did note, and I think a lot of places have seen this, is that there was more of a sense among those residents that they viewed bike share as a recreational activity rather than as a transportation activity. And then in terms of some barriers, some of the key barriers that we saw, and these echoes some of what other studies have found, cost, it was a #1 barrier, concerns about fees and liabilities. So even in places where there were discount programs and there were programs set up to help people not have extra overage fees and that sort of thing, when people were giving their credit card to join the system, they were concerned about that, and particularly for lower income people, that just the sense that they might end up on the hook for extra costs. And then traffic safety and misconceptions about how to use a system, or not knowing about discounts, for example, was a barrier that we saw. In terms of a few other gaps or of key findings, one of the things we found was that outreach was still needed to do more to overcome some of those misconceptions, to let people know about the discounts, and just more about how to use the system. On the positive side, we did find that once people, and this is from the bike share users that we surveyed, once people did join up and use the system, the people that came to the bike share system from the low income discount programs, from the engagement programs, they turned out to be just as likely to use the system intensively as people who signed up through the normal channels or were paying the full price. They also were more likely to report travel cost savings, so they were saving money on their transportation. And I guess, one of the things that I mentioned, something that I come back to earlier about kind of the positive sign in people using the system more, was that several other studies have found that low-income users are, in fact, some of the most heavy users of the system in terms of using it. It depends on the study, but like 20 or more trips a month. And so there seems to be the suggestion that if you can get people using the system, there's good possibility to really engage these kind of equity target communities. So now that kind of brings us to the report that we put together last year, which was a national scan of bike share equity programs. So for this project, we reached out to try to understand some of the successes and the challenges, and the replicability and the way that systems were measuring their equity programs, and to kind of bring those together in one resource that could be a sort of a cheat sheet for systems to learn about what other systems are doing, how they were measuring their successes. We reached out to over 200 contacts at cities and bike share systems around the country. We ended up surveying 70 different systems, and we got reporting on 105 different equity programs. So some programs had more than one equity program. And the goal of the report, as I mentioned, is just to help systems learn about what other places are doing, document ways that they were measuring and defining their successes and challenges so that they could improve their system. And here's a map, as you can see, of the cities that we engaged in that survey. So as a quick look at what is in that report, first we talked about kind of how do you define and articulate equity, and that translates into policies and goals and metrics. We looked at specific equity programming around different topic areas. So there are sections in the report on station siting and service areas, payment and fees, education and facilitation programs, so helping people sign up, marketing information and materials, mixed fleet options, so incorporating dockless or e-bikes into the system, internal operations and workforce, and then finally transit integration. And then at the end of the report, there's quite a bit of material kind of documenting some of what were reported to us as the successes, the challenges, the potential improvements. And then there are 5 case studies really going into depth on what some different cities are doing kind of on a more holistic level, and how the equity programming fits into their system. So I'm going to talk quickly about a few key findings from this recent study. One of which is, so which systems have equity programs? Are there things that we can determine based on that? So one of the things that we see is that bigger systems are more likely to have equity programming, and as you can see, about 3/4 of larger systems had a specific equity program, and then another 12 to 14% said they had equity built into other aspects of their system. Very small systems of 0 to 150 bikes, as you can see, less than half of those kind of had equity in their program, or in terms of what they reported to us. So, potential area for growth there for those small systems. And then in terms of who are they targeting, systems could, for each program we asked about this, and they could indicate more than one of these groups for a particular program, and that's why these are more than 100%. But low-income individuals, so 56% said that was a specific target of their program. Specific neighborhoods or geographic areas, about 1/3. Specific racial or ethnic groups, people of all abilities, and so this would be like an adaptive bike share program in most cases, at 15% there. And then other populations, which systems specified to us included unbanked or underbanked people without smartphones or credit cards, and veterans and students were amongst those that fell into that category. And then one of the questions we asked was, their perceived effectiveness of their own programming. So this is not, we didn't measure the effectiveness of any of their programming. We were kind of collecting this information, But one of the things we did find is, and there's a few things to look at in this table, the average number of programs. So a system could have more than one equity program. So an example might be, here in Portland, we have Bike Town for All, which is targeted. There's a low-income discount part of that. We have Adaptive Bike Town. So those would qualify as two different programs. And we left it up to the systems to define what they thought was a one program versus two or more. And then the average number of elements. And so that could include, as I said, a low income discount. It could include cash pay. There were different things that they could tell us were kind of pieces of those programs. But what the trend is that the bigger systems tended to have more programs geared towards equity outcomes. They tended to have more elements as part of those programs, and they tended to rate their overall effectiveness as higher. So we it suggests that there may be this ability in bigger programs to have a more holistic approach, which may end up being more effective. And then finally, the last thing I want to touch on are a couple of slides on equity programming costs. So we did ask how much their equity programs cost. About 13% were in that 200,000 or more range. Most of the programs were less than that. As you can see, we got information funding numbers from about half of them. Another 15% told us that the program didn't cost anything, so it was just they would just built into their system. Another 11% said they couldn't specify, and it was staff time or other things that were not dedicated to an equity program line. And then about a quarter we didn't get cost information from. But in general, they're kind of smaller numbers for these programs, and they tended to be short, 1 or 2 years in most cases, which often left them looking for more funding after that. And then finally, what are some of the equity funding program funding sources? As you can see, about 38% were from grant or foundation sources. City or municipality sources were about 18%. Sponsors, operators, and community partners were other sources. And then about a quarter had funding from a variety of these different sources. So all of this is a lot of information to pretty quickly. The report is 136 pages or so. What we wanted to do was to make it more accessible, because we know not that many people want to read that long of a report. And so for that, we decided to develop some shorter briefs that could get at some of these topics in a way that would be more digestible. So I'm going to hand it over to John to discuss some of these briefs and give you a little bit of their flavor. And John, do you want to grab the screen from me?
Yes. Hold on 1 second while I do that. And can you see my brief topics, Nathan?
Yes, I can see it.
Great. Well, thanks, Nathan. I think that was a great overview of the main report that we put together. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about the briefs that came out of that report. And I do want to say there's all the really good information is in the report. It's just very detailed and a lengthy report. So I encourage people to download that and get into each of these topics. But so we were trying to think about what is the best way for us to also get the information out to people in easy digestible form to start them thinking about developing programs. So these are really meant for people or programs or organizations that are looking to either develop a program on a specific topic, or in general equity programs for bike share, or kind of wanting to retool and update or think about how they can make their programs better. So we went through a process with our technical advisory committee to kind of ask, what are the top topics that you would like to see briefs on, and both for kind of mature bike share systems, but also for bike share systems that are just starting out, just going through the process of saying, hey, we would like to enhance equity programs within our bike share system. So as you see, here are the 10 topics. I'm going to be talking about 2 of them, equity policies and data collection here as just kind of an example of what we have, what we've learned and what are in the briefs. The briefs are available at this link, and that link was sent out by Brendan. So I encourage you all to look at those briefs. We also are very interested in getting feedback on them. Are they helpful? What is helpful about them? What information is good? What would you like to see if we ever did other briefs? So we encourage a lot of feedback on these. So in general, this is what the briefs look like. This is one for adaptive bike share. They kind of are 2-pagers, easily digestible, and they try to distill the information from the report. Both, so we set up with an overview, current approaches, some considerations, resources that we found that are useful, that we point people to kind of outside of the report, and then thoughts about how to measure and evaluate any of these types of programs. So, in transition to talk about these 2 other briefs that, 2 of these briefs I want to talk about, I wanted to talk about the broader theme that we saw, and that is, to really make equity programs successful, they really touch all aspects of your program, your system, the people you serve, the partners that are joint on that bike share program, and really it starts with a vision for equity, and how that vision is transmitted and embraced and brought into your partners and your riders and the users and residents in which your bike share system is. So, and then that vision is described or translated, as part of your policy statement. So that gets into the first, brief of equity policy brief. It's basically articulating a specific policy that helps establish goals, and particularly around equity. And this can be for the whole program, the whole system, or on specific programs that you want to enable. So, for example, like a adaptive bike share program. So when from the report, we found that 1 in 3 systems, fewer than 1 in 3 systems actually had an equity statement or a policy statement, and 20% either had a definition of equity that was passed down from the city to use, or some type of working definition that they use. So basically around 50% actually had some type of guiding statement, definition, or policy that they were working under. This, of course, was more, we saw this more in larger systems that were over 750 bikes, but it's really important for all different systems, small and large. So really, it's important because it establishes the goals for the program, and I'm going to get into this a little bit on the data side, but it also builds accountability with your users, with the residents, with the people that your system is kind of part of. It also can include internal operations, how you do your work. How do you elevate equity within the practices of your operations? And then it also can be pushed out to your partners and how they do their work in joint with you. So, but there are trade-offs, this issue about specificity and generality, brevity and detail, is it practical or is it aspirational? These are things that you will have to go through as you develop your policy statements or definitions that are for your program. But what that really does is sets your program and your system up for success, because what we have seen is that developing a policy, an equity policy, helps you determine the goals and objectives and targets that you're trying to see within your equity programs and even your bike share program on a whole. And the thing that I'm going to do here is connected to the data collection brief, is that really what we saw sometimes is that you don't want to let data drive policy. You want policy should define the data collection that you're doing. And we saw some of this is sometimes data was just being collected, but without a real purpose of what is it trying to measure. So for the data collection brief, it's based on this, obviously the study, approximately 61% of the equity efforts described included a data collection component. For some popular programming types, though, data collection was absent or too limited to provide much guidance at all. And only 34% of the marketing campaigns and 39% of ambassador programs that were, are highly used programs throughout the scan that we saw had any data gathering effort. So, how do you know if these programs are doing what you want to do? Reaching the people that you want to be reach and really enhancing your equity vision in your programs. So, some common approaches that we saw out there is that, they were using, general membership surveys that maybe didn't always address equity, just general trip data or frequency data they were collecting, but without really any kind of tie-in to the equity programs. And then also sometimes they were collecting great quality feedback, which is great for marketing and outreach programs to tell stories, but that it's not really always very good for evaluation and translation, translating that to some type of evaluation. But we did see challenges, as many of you know, inadequate resources, tools, staff, skills to be able to do these things. So often, as you're considering, developing your data collection programs or how you think about data, you need to think about your resources. And if you don't have the resource capacity or the technical capacity to do some of this stuff, who can you bring in? Often a local university or other partners can help you develop a program, do some of that data collection, even do some of the analysis for you as a team member. What are you asking your partners to provide? Do you have them providing equity related data, as part of the contracts of what they're supposed to be submitting to you? And then, really finally, are you asking some of the right questions as it relates to your equity outcomes, in the data that you are collecting? So I'd like to leave you with this in that, and I think this would be very useful for programs to start thinking about. And this goes back to that that pyramid I showed you is, what story are you trying to tell with your data, and what are you trying to measure in your ultimate outcomes? So, if you're collecting data on events, how does this help you understand more about membership, more about how your members are using the bikes, and then ultimately, what are the outcomes that this is going to tell you? Is it helping people connect to jobs? Is it increasing their own economic benefit? And then, is there a physical activity or health of your members? Has it increased? So sometimes it's really, it's great for telling stories because it also helps you tell your funders and your partners, how significant the work that you're doing is for the population that you're trying to serve, particularly on the equity side. So that ends my little presentation about the briefs. I encourage you to go download them, look at them, give us feedback, and then I'm going to switch it over to Adriel to talk a little bit about MoGo.
Cool, thank you. Let me get my screen set up. Can you guys see me already?
I see you.
Okay, perfect.
And
All
you
right.
and you should have, great.
Yeah. So first and foremost, thank everyone for, thank you guys for letting me be a part of this. I really appreciate it. And so I just want to jump into a little bit about MoGo first, and then talk specifically about some of the equity programs that we have in place, but also talk about how we are marketing these things, and some of the challenges that have been presented thanks to the current situation that we find ourselves in. Just as an overview, for those who don't know, MoGo is a Detroit-based nonprofit bike share system. We launched in May 2017, and then just this year in June, in the middle of shutdown, we did an expansion into Northwest Detroit and Southern Oakland County. So we have another thing, we have 6,000 memberships since launch. And a really interesting data point here is that 27.5% of those memberships are the Access Pass, which I'll go into a little bit later. And so we have, along with the Access Pass, we have two additional basic memberships. One is the monthly pass, which we do for $20, and we have an annual pass for $90. But we also have two casual pass options, the pay-as-you-go, which is $1 to unlock, and then 25 cents per minute, and then the prepaid pass, which is kind of like a phone prepaid pass, a prepaid phone. Sorry about that. It's $18 for 2 hours, and then if you go over that, it's just 25 cents per additional minute. So all these new, other than the Access Pass, the rest of these pass options are new. The monthly pass and annual pass went up, and then the other two passes are brand new that we introduced those with our expansion. And so we currently have 620 bikes at 75 stations. 20 of those are non-kiosk light stations, which means that you either need your membership card or fob with you, or the transit app to be able to key in a code to unlock those bikes. And then part of our fleet are 50 pedal assist bikes, which are proven to be our most popular bikes in the system. So we have two vendors that we work with, PBSC, which provides our equipment, and then Shift Transit, which does the operations. So MoGo administrative side, there are 4 of us on the team. It's interesting when you talked about capacity to do some of the data collection and some of the other things that, you know, with 4 of us, we definitely depend on some help with some other partnerships. So I want to talk about community outreach initially. So just to give a snapshot of what we normally would be doing and to reach underserved markets, or to do this in a sort of equitable way, are things like, you know, being present at events, definitely community meetings where we target specific areas and invite people from that area to come and talk about it, or for us to talk about MoGo. Site visits, and then panels and advisory committees. So doing things like this, this very panel here, is one of the ways that we actually achieve outreach. So that these are things that we normally would be doing in a non-COVID world. And these are just some of the pieces of collateral that we reuse, right? Like to make posters and flyers and things like this to use to promote what MoGo is all about. So specifically around equitable outreach, the challenges that we find ourselves facing today are obviously COVID-19, the global pandemic, and the subsequent shutdowns and things that have happened around that, including a loss of major events. One of the ways that we really like to reach out and touch the public would be at things, partnering with festivals, with crawls, all types of things that happen, especially here in Detroit. The summer is where everything happens. So we've got about four solid months of major events. It's not, you can't go a weekend without something happening. So all those things are shut down now. Another challenge that we had in outreach is the limited businesses that are open, and limited face-to-face interaction. So some of the solutions that we've come up with are the digital outreach efforts. We definitely have stepped that up, and that means, across social media channels, our website, different, our newsletters, things like that. But we've sort of pivoted and focused on smaller events that were allowed to happen. So those would be farmers markets, and any sort of smaller alternative events that different communities or neighborhoods would be doing, where we could go out and set up a tent, and provide information with masks on, and socially distanced things. But we did that in a limited capacity this year. Another thing that we are exploring doing, we have not done this yet, but we are planning to, specifically around some access pass information, our mailers. We are targeting specific communities, and since we can't necessarily interact with them in person as much, we have decided that we would disseminate information to mailers. That also is part of that's a real equitable piece right there, which is about meeting people where they are. And so just like with the collateral that we have, like posters and flyers and stuff, we're very conscious of getting those pieces out to people in different ways, outside of some of the things that I talked about earlier. And then, it's also about engaging community newsletters and asking them to help us message. So that could mean a block club here in Detroit, as well as a sort of a bigger, perhaps the city of Ferndale has a newsletter or something that they put out, that they would tag us in or let us be a part of. So I want to talk about MoGo for All. MoGo for All is basically our equitable initiative, but it's designed to make bike share an inclusive, accessible, and equitable transportation service for riders in Detroit. The key elements are our $5 access pass, the pay with cash options, our street skills classes, which we were not able to do this year, obviously because of COVID, and adaptive MoGo. So the access pass is a $5 annual pass for registered members of the following state benefit programs, right? So if you get a bridge card, if you have cash assistance, if you're on the Healthy Michigan plan, a children's special health care services, you qualify then for our access pass. So that's a really amazing thing. So the access is an annual membership. So our annual membership price is $90. If you qualify for state benefits, you get that same pass with the same benefits for only $5. That's $85 difference. And currently, again, we are at 27.5% of our annual membership. Members are access pass holders. So that's a really big piece, and I think that's one of the leading numbers in the bike share world right now. And then along with that is the pay with cash option that we have for people, specifically for people who are unbanked or who are not comfortable with the banking system. They can actually pay with cash. We partnered with Pay Near Me, and so you can make your payments at any 7-Eleven, CVS, or Family Dollar. Which again, and there a large percentage of folks who are on the access pass, the large percentage of people who use the pay with cash option are access pass holders. Yeah, roughly 70% of all cash transactions are for the access pass. One of the other things that we did to sort of push this out was we had a Better Bike Share Partnership mini grant. So we partnered with places that cater specifically that provide services for people who could benefit greatly from an access pass. So here in Detroit, that was the Mariners Inn, Noah Project, and 4th Street Open Door. And just in a series of events specifically tied to that specific grant, we had 41 access pass signups, and those folks have written 2,300 times to date. And so about marketing it, these are some of the pieces of collateral that we actually produced and distributed for specifically around the MoGo for All thing. So this poster that you see on the side is a retail poster, but also it's something that we actually have on some of our at our stations on some of our map frames. So it's really about getting it out there. When I say again about how to disseminate this information, you know, this is about going to gas stations. This is about going to the corner stores. And again, really digging into where people go, right? So some neighborhoods that are underserved don't have the luxury of having a community center. And not everyone goes to church. So a lot of these other places become since a neighborhood hub. So we definitely make sure that we pay attention to those areas and disseminate information in those places. The second initiative that I really want to talk about is our Adaptive MoGo program. So that launched in May 2018. We have 13 adaptive cycles. And so as you can tell from the picture, these are cycles that are designed for people with different needs, whether that be a recumbent bike or a tricycle. We're the second major city. Thanks, Portland is the other one. We're the second major city to add adaptive bike share. We do it with a partnership with Wheelhouse Detroit and the programs to educate all cyclists, aka Peak. And just a quick snapshot, in 2018, we did 174 rides. And in 2019, 257 rides, which is a 48% ridership increase. So I will talk about some challenges and then some solutions. So the way that our system works basically is people, because these bikes can't fit into a regular bike share station, we partner with Wheelhouse Detroit in order to house those bikes and then to actually do the fittings with folks. Some of the bikes you need to be fitted for it before you can just take it and ride it. So they weren't necessarily comfortable with those types of interactions this year. So we had to delay the start of the season. And for actually quite a bit, there was also another hitch. And that is we store the bikes off the site of their facility in a container, and the plot of land that container is on, the contract negotiations for that space were being held up for a variety of reasons, and we just again got the okay to do it. So we just started our system at our season at the beginning of this month, and we're going to run to November or so. So we, with all those challenges that we had, decided to just make the rest of the season free. So right now we are providing free adaptive bike share to anyone who does it. And as you can imagine, the reservations are way up. I mean, we've got our weekends, we have had more reservations than we ever have. So hopefully by the end of the season, we'll see an uptick in overall ridership with it. But along with that, as another solution, losing the partner that would normally have handled the reservations themselves and people coming in and getting fitted, and then actually providing the bike for folks and checking them back in. Not having that was a really big issue. So I told you there were 4 of us. So a quarter of us, one person, Rory, who is our director of programming and operations, and a couple of people from Peak took on that role. So they legit for every reservation have to go down, and they're doing this now. So leaving their house, going to where the bikes are, and preparing everything for the people so that these people can ride, which I think is an amazing thing for them to do, because we really did want to give people the opportunity to ride and to get some exercise this season. And so that basically does it for me with this presentation. So if you guys want to stay in touch, please do. And we're on the major social channels. So thank you. And I'm gonna stop showing my screen. All right. Can you guys? Yeah, I think.
Yeah, thanks so much,
All right.
Adriel. And so we have a number of questions. We have a number for you.
Okay.
People are really interested in your program and the marketing challenges. But let's just go back a minute. And during John's presentation, you mentioned a lot. You're talking about data collection and sort of staffing and resources. So we have a question that came in based on your research and findings reported in your brief. Who do you think should be responsible for the data collection and analysis with respect to the city, municipality, or the operator?
John, do you want to take that one?
Well, I mean, it really is everybody's, responsibility. It all depends on, a lot of it depends on the way the system is developed in each of the cities. Is it, city owned? Is it a city partner project, or is it like a nonprofit, a little bit like MoGo? It's, who owns that? I think a lot of it is building up that partnership, because they can bring a lot of data that a bike share organization might not have access to, about demographics, resources, of obviously money that can do some of that data collection and analysis, and ultimately it's about a broader issue, right? Bike share provides mobility and accessibility to the residents of that city, and getting the partners to believe in that mission can also help in getting buy-in on who can help collect, on data collection and spread those resources. So
If I could just add to that, and pulling off of something you were talking about earlier, John, is articulating up at when you're thinking about the policies and the goals, determining what data you need to be collecting and who should be collecting it at that time. And I think that can help, kind of establish some responsibility at that time, in terms of what data you need and how to collect it.
Great, thanks. So Nathan, during your presentation, you're talking about the different size bike share systems. And I know Adriel and MoGo from the report is one of the larger ones. And yet when he's discussing what's going on, I mean, it might just be because the summer or things are new. You can tell that there's some staff issues. So is there sort of like a suggestion of building blocks for maybe the smaller ones of where to start?
Well, and I guess one of the things that I didn't show in there, but we talked about a little bit in the report, is that for equity programming, smaller locations were more dependent upon grant and foundation, and they tended to be smaller, small grants. So, sometimes 5,000, 10,000, so I guess it's kind of, getting those building blocks and getting something going, and then having it, built into the rest of the program as well. And, and as we saw, some of the largest, well, all of the systems, there was about that 10 to 15% that even if they didn't have a program, they had equity as a key component to other parts of their programs. But I don't know. I would be curious for Adriel's thoughts on that. I mean, I think even big systems struggle to find ways to pay for the programming and to sustain it. And I think that's a challenge for everyone.
Yeah. So, I want to start off first by saying that I think that one of the things that we were lucky to be able to do was to bake sort of equity into our system. So when we launched with the Access program, with the Access Pass. We launched with Pay Near Me. We launched with the idea to do street skills classes. We didn't launch with Adaptive, but we had the idea for it, right? So, And so I think that that's important too, for even younger ones to sort of, if you're gonna get in this, to get in it as soon as possible, because then you can grow, right? And then the things that you're doing, whether it's programming and marketing, begin to have that, you have that lens, right? And but you're right, you know, our adaptive program for us is supported by 2 different foundations, you know, so you know, that helped us get the bikes in the first place, and then help sort of sustain it. And then the access for all program, in a sense, is kind of subsidized by the other members at this point. So while you know, we obviously would love to have some additional funding, some additional revenue streams for that, or funding for it. It's not. I think in our specific instance, it's not so much the size and scope. We're small but mighty, right? And I think that, like, Rory and our executive director Lisa Nazowski do an amazing job of getting resources, being able to handle it, right? But it is more of the resources that are out there who value this type of equity in a bike share system. You know,
and I guess,
yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and I also think, you know, going back to the data challenges that we heard from a lot of different systems in terms of being able to document successes and outcomes. My sense is that, like, cities should be, it would be great if more cities really valued this work. And when I say that, I don't mean cities don't value, but I mean put their money behind it and would fund more programming. And I think that if more of those outcomes could be documented and kind of the successes be clear, you know, and so I think it ties to the ability to kind of document and have the data to support it. And, you know, hopefully that could encourage more municipal funding of these sorts of programs, because they do benefit the cities overall, I think. So
I think so too. And you know, in Detroit's, in MoGo's instance, you know, you know, we don't really have city funding at all. We're an independent nonprofit bike share system.
Yeah.
And so it's, you know, there's perhaps one day.
Yeah.
I do want to say one thing too about the data that you're talking about too. So while it would be great to get some of that, I do want to just throw in a little caveat here, and that's that some of the people that benefit from these programs are very sensitive about the data that's collected on them, right? So there's that challenge too when it comes to actually getting a real clear snapshot of it. It's about, you know, whether people are sensitive or not to their information being used in this scenario. There was a story done on MoGo before that we then had to, after it was published, had to go back and ask the people, you know, ask them to please remove the pictures and names of the people, and that was to protect them. So that's another caveat in the data, right?
Yeah,
That's a really important point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Adriel, I think we have two sort of different types of questions coming in that I'd address to you, but I don't want to assume. But that, you know, you're talking about your organization. I know how things work, you know. But one of them is about sort of how you are pitching to these other organizations, and from looking at MoGo, I see that there is some support that is local. Let's say, like, you're not necessarily going to have the same organization giving or corporation giving you the support in Philadelphia or something. But in general, how have you guys pitched that pitched the support, the ask?
Well, you know, I think it's a combination of things. This is something that Lisa Nazowski, our executive director, really does and does really well, I think. But you know, it's localized, right, to an extent. So you go with the heavy hitters that are in your backyard initially, right? So GM, for instance, did a lot of supported us in the beginning for the street skills classes. You know, they branded the helmets, got the helmets, and provided some funding for that. So you go to like what's in your own backyard, and then you start going out from there. So like the Ralph C. Wilson Junior Foundation is supporting us a lot with some of the other programs, and it's because it just happened to align with what they're doing, and I think that's maybe that's one of the ways. I think our approach is to really sort of see who has alignment with transportation, with alternative transportation, with inclusive and equitable work. And it's, I mean, I don't think it's a magic formula. Sometimes it's a scatter shot, where you got to throw it out there to whoever. But the approach, I think, is to really sort of doing some sort of targeting and saying, hey, we really think that, we've seen some work that you've been doing around physical access to things, right? So would you, that might be a great partner for the adaptive program. Whereas on the access side, there's a variety of people or organizations that have foundations specifically trying to uplift people. But it's like, in what direction, right? Does that boat want to go up? So you just target people. You look at the landscape and see who's doing what initially. And then, I think that part of that strategy is to tell people what it is that you're doing. So when you do that, I think that should be part of like your strategy for actually getting more resources, right? Is actually telling people that you've got this program or that you're serving this particular population of people. Because when people hear that, then they start coming to you. So I think that that's a really important thing that a lot of people don't actually do.
Great. The other angle is about the people who are using the bikes, and so there's a question about how effective your outreach via mailers has been. In addition, I guess Trek and NITC, there's been research on different types of bicyclists. The idea of, there are people who will bike through anything. There are others who are more hesitant. And then, so I'm just wondering, and also the last question, so now I'm piling it on really, but is there a sort of feedback? Is that sort of the data collection type thing, like where you hear from what you need to do to get a community person to bike? Can you go to an organization and get funding for that? I'm sorry, that was a bit, but
yeah. It's okay. So starting with the last question, we actually just completed our annual survey. So we do an annual survey to riders. One, we split it up. One is to casual riders. One is to members. So we take what information we get on people who, when I say casual riders, for those who don't know, it's folks who opt to just buy one of the daily passes that day or the casual pass. And then there are the members who have actually committed to something like a monthly access or annual pass. So we just did this, and that is by far the greatest source of rider info that we get, and about how we're doing, whether these programs are effective, whether the kiosk system is effective. So it's a great way of data collection, and it's not necessarily, I don't want to say it's low-hanging fruit, but it's an easy, non-complicated way for us to get some really valuable information out there. I mean, from there. You have to remind me of the other questions.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I really combined it. So I think that was something I was really interested in. Thank you. And something that came to mind from the discussion. But also, people are listening and interested in your promotional work and maybe the results of reaching out and in getting that base.
Yeah. So again, on the marketing piece of it all, the promoting piece of it, under normal times we would have a sort of different strategy than what we are currently doing, right? So let's start with the mailers is actually something we haven't done yet, but that's a response to the situation that we find ourselves in now with COVID, where there was complete lack of events. I had a work plan that you guys would have loved, been amazed by for this year that went completely out of the window in April and May, right? When I realized that I may not be able to accomplish any of this entire year. And so that was a lot of face-to-face interactions. We actually would go to shelters, to temporary housing facilities, and present MoGo and do sign-up events right then and there. So that we can't do that now. So the mailer idea is something that we were like, well, wait, we have stations around this area and around that area, blah, blah, blah. Let's see if we could just reach out and touch this way by doing direct mail, which is something that we've never done before. So I don't have the results of that. But I do know that we've modified sort of our approach period, and we've gone to things like Live 6, which is a big community organization here, the San Juan Block Club, which is part of the Fitzgerald neighborhood here, where we just launched stations in June. By connecting and asking those organizations to advocate for us, right? Like, please include us in your mailer. Hey, can you let your constituents know that we offer a $5 access program? We participated in a virtual event at Fitzgerald Park, where we produced a video to talk about the Access Pass and the different programs that were available. So we just had to pivot and start doing things a slightly different way, more in the digital sphere this year than we ever have before. But yeah, that's sort of how we really reach out and connect. And I do want to, sorry, I know that we're running sort of short on time, but
We're fine.
Okay, cool. I mentioned this before during the presentation, but again, I really want to sort of drive home the point that when we talk about different communities and different types of communities, we also, in a city like Detroit, which is sadly the largest poor city in America, it's not all like that. So don't get it twisted. But there's some unique challenges, right, to sort of reaching out and touch people, and you can't necessarily depend on the fact that everyone has a smartphone and can get that ad delivered, right? Or that everyone's on Facebook or Twitter or all these other apps where you are, doing your paid marketing. So we really have to think about street level marketing, and what does that mean? And so one of the things that we've noticed, in my experience at least, and other people have noticed, is that when you go the usual suspects, right? You go the usual route of going to like these community meetings, or these sort of city council district-wide meetings, all those types of things. The people that you continue to sort of come across, even the block club meetings, let me put it that way, are people who tend to already be activated and sort of want that kind of information in the first place, but you're not reaching probably the majority of people in that neighborhood. So you really have to start looking at areas and saying, okay, where are the places that people go? Where is the one place that everyone in that neighborhood goes to? You know what those are? They're the places that most marketers don't think of going. They're gas stations, they're the liquor stores. They are, I mean, churches to an extent, but even beyond that, they're the barber shops. They're the beauty salons, the hair supply place.
Yeah.
It's probably a Detroit specific thing, but there are these alternative places, and so you really have part of your marketing plan, especially for something like an access pass, or pay near me, or pay with cash option. You really have to start targeting places like that and just simply going in and saying, hey, can I put a poster up here? Or even doing something like Rider Perks, which is it's a program that we have where we partner with businesses here, but offering for some, incentive to actually help you. But that's a really important piece of this puzzle, is actually going to these sort of non-traditional congregating places that we think of, that every marketer thinks of when we talk about a list that we create with street marketing.
I mean, that sounds
Adriel,
really.
can I ask? Oh, go ahead, John.
I was just going to say that it seems like two things. One, it's very grassroots, which takes a lot of resources and time, and but also very neighborhood specific. So like one neighborhood, it could be a hair salon or a barber shop, or gas stations, or in another place it might be a place of worship, or because the different communities have, and so understanding those community places of congregation, but also where they get their information, trusted information, is really important as you build out that outreach effort.
Absolutely, and it's a struggle sometimes to dive into that. And I'm not saying that happens overnight. It's not going to be the beginning of September and by September 15th you've got it all figured out, right? But it does really mean sort of we operate across the city, and actually the region now, because we're in a different county in the northern suburbs of Detroit. So it really is like, after time and being out there, and part of my job as community outreach is actually sometimes just going places and going, if we have a station somewhere, I might bike to that station and then get off and like walk around and see what's happening over there. So it really does takes time, but that's the pot of gold that you're looking for, in my opinion, at least. Nathan, I know you were gonna, I'm sorry I interrupted you.
So you had mentioned Pay Near Me, and we got a couple of questions about that, and one of them said that they heard maybe Pay Near Me was getting out of the bike share cash acceptance business. So I don't know, are you still working with them, or do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so as of right now we are. We heard the same thing. But our operator, so we partner with Shift Transit, they will actually operate the system. And they had not heard that at all, and had reached out, and they hadn't heard directly back from Pay Near Me, but the last update that I got, we literally had a transaction that morning. So as far as we know, Pay Near Me is still going. We haven't gotten an official word otherwise, so we're still rolling with it for now. Yeah.
Something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
that has actually saved and been very vital to these programs as developed over the last couple, 4+ years, that it's really been, piloted in a couple places and then really expanded across the country for many of these programs. So if that kind of goes away, I'm not sure what fills that void for the cash.
I'm not sure either, and I'm not 100% sure why they would get, because it's what I heard is not specifically that they are going away, just that they are getting out of bike share, and I'm not 100% sure why. A dollar is a dollar, no matter where it comes from, right? So I'm not sure why they would give that up, but it would be I think really devastating to a lot of folks who I mean, a huge percentage of our cash payments are people who utilize the Access Pass, who don't have bank accounts, who can't get a bank account, or who don't want a bank account. So I think it's a really, it would be really not cool on their part to do. I'll just say that. But yeah, I have no idea. I'm sure that we'll come up with a creative solution if it comes down to it, but keep your fingers crossed.
Well, thanks.
Right. Well, we should cut it off there. Are there any final thoughts that any of you have?
I just want to thank Adriel for joining us and really putting, somebody who's on the ground and doing this, that helps put our university perspective, in grounds it a bit, and just really appreciate you joining us. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate being here.
Thank you. All right. So yeah, please join us for some upcoming NITC monthly webinars. Thank you all today. And yeah, have a good rest of the day.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.